Decentralize all the things. Decentralize all the things.
Hey there! Welcome to the Web3 Summit Decentralize Now podcast series, hosted by the Decentralize All The Things podcast network. This series features discussions about decentralization from the 2018 Web3 Summit held in Berlin, Germany. This is episode 3. In this episode, we listen in on a roundtable discussion about Blockchain4Good and different ways the tech could be used to impact things like climate change, fair data, investing, and more. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
So this is just a random roundtable discussion on Blockchain4Good and how we can enable blockchain to do good, right? So obviously, I talked about Giveth. Keeley talked about Sedum. Maybe you guys have other projects that you want to talk about. Does anyone have any topics that they want to discuss that I can just note down? Yeah.
Climate change.
Climate change. Okay. Anybody else have any topics? Fair data. Okay. Any other topics? Charity and investing. Okay. Those are pretty good. So, let's start with climate change.
Hey everyone. My name is Liam. I'm currently a blockchain and full stack engineer in Rotterdam. And I think blockchain's really cool, been in the space for a while. Currently we're doing a decentralized energy grid project. I know it's been the big thing since peer-to-peer was a thing anyway, not even before blockchain. But I'm really interested in what we can do with blockchain and specifically token economies in terms of governing value, having more economic leverage per person to basically stir decentralized action around climate change. I think it's obviously quite a big issue. The world is obviously quite on a different moral streak right now, on a different momentum, and I find it interesting that we could actually re-engineer sort of the whole, I guess, capitalist incentive mechanism to give people more power over in their daily interactions things that support / go against climate action. Don't know how this discussion works, but just going to put it out there.
So I guess the question then is, what metrics do we use to actually qualify what is change? Because we'll all have different opinions on that. And personally, I'm not sure about the science, but other people will have their own certainties. So how do we arrive at one metric that we all care about, or at least can validity to?
I think that's a really good question. And I think in terms of metrics, obviously you give something a metric and suddenly people optimize for it. What I advocate is less an absolute metric and more a relative one. So in terms of saying, we need to come up with something that represents, the climate improving. We have that, sure. But I mean, maybe something better is just looking at it from a pragmatic perspective. What can we just have as a metric that relative to what we have now is better? Because right now we just have we just have energy labels and food packaging and stuff like that. What if you could walk through the supermarket? You can do this in Sweden. You can get an AR app and it shows you which products are vegan and which are not. What if, with the whole supply chain being transparent, with things being represented by very clear forms of tokens and affiliations, every economic purchase you make becomes a vote for or against something connected to the climate, for example.
Just a few brainstorms on putting an absolute measurement on climate change. This doesn't affect things like desertification or failing agricultural yields. But for example, the Maldives and Bangladesh are feared to be underwater within a decade or a couple decades. So how about the water level in a place? If the water level in my street is zero, there's no water there. But if it rises because of floods and the water level stays there for a certain amount of time, that could be one absolute measurement. And speaking of what we just saw here, what if when we fund, for example, the something in the Maldives or something in Bangladesh, we could also use decentralized finance to multiply those yields, so that if there's a catastrophic flood in Bangladesh or in Maldives or wherever else I'm not thinking about now, measuring that water level, for instance, can also be a multiplier in a derivative that pays back to the people who are afflicted a huge multiple of what was raised. So if like the Bangladesh anti-cyclone fund reached $10,000 in ETH, with decentralized finance, that could have a multiplier effect of 100 or 300 if that absolute measurement goes up higher. This is just a brainstorm. Anyone else want to add to that?
We got to use the mic, but this is like 10. Yeah. Oh, it's a talking stick.
Sure. I just think as industry as a whole, I would like to see preventative measures, actionable measures taken. So once water levels have risen, like you said, we're not so far behind the ball that we're trying to just compensate for problems people are going through, but really trying to, interact with the future problems and change them. If that makes any sense.
I think some component of this is that, that's kind of, like she mentioned, paying the externalities after the problems caused by the externalities happen, whereas our current system, basically the issue is that we're not taking into account the externalities and the external costs of our actions, which means we have to find some way to price that in without making basically a tax, or we have to find a system for paying these costs beforehand so that they don't become an issue.
But most people around the world are really stubborn. They don't see the risk. Maybe in this close circle, or in maybe a circle that's maybe numbering 50,000 people worldwide, we can extrapolate using our brains and using the science, but most people can't, and most people need to be dramatically shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I'd hesitate against the word stubborn. I think it's more like, empathetically speaking, it's like, at least for me, this is just my belief, but we're aware of it because we've got the nice growing up, the nice background, and it's more the sense that this is where money comes in, and where money is great, because what money enables us is it's a mechanism to make people care about things accidentally. So it makes them we all care about buying beer and bread. Not necessarily everyone cares about monetary policy or inflation or why that's happening, although those things can still coexist, and align the incentives of the group.
Hey, Gregor.
I just wanted to go back to your thought a minute ago that was about how do you get the multiplier effect, because I'm largely in your camp that we're too short-sighted to foresee every disaster. Where it comes from, we don't know. So when the proverbial shit hits the fan, we need a multiplier effect on the resources that we have to create reparations. The mechanism of that, I'm not sure, but again, it comes back to kind of potentially another bonding curve that can create scarcity with the token supply as you go, pegged to some kind of, like a friend of mine, she's doing the World Replenish Index, so pegged to a number or a metric like that. I don't really know the full metric, but a workable metric is the idea. So if you can peg the multiplier effect to the metric that shows, as you were saying, then I think that's a great idea. But that's just an opinion.
Yeah, how does that work?
I was going to say maybe the answer is in TCRs, as Griff mentioned earlier, or bonded curves, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, what you're describing is an insurance policy. And
a dynamic insurance policy that changes, and the TCR can measure our confidence that something is the case or not the case. So if we are all confident that this is going to happen, maybe we would stake a huge amount. It's a matter of life and death, a matter of survival of the planet, survival of our species as it is now. So So maybe just the financial power of 50,000 people could, at this level of confidence, could reach the not caring of a billion people, or a billion people who are interested in beer, burgers, and whatever. Yeah.
So if we know that in 30 years, like how many millions of people will be underwater in Bangladesh? How many? 150. So then the time is now probably to start building some homes that are not in that region, right? So it shouldn't be like in 20 years some emergency fund or something. It should be now, slowly, tomorrow, moving 100 people out of this region and then educate them all. Then maybe better, more money over 30 years than a lot of emergency money in the last 5 years. I don't know how.
Yeah, you were mentioning earlier how what money does is it lets us care about things that we don't really care about. So why don't we make a money that cares about these issues and preempt the problem as opposed to wait for the problem to happen and then...
But you can prevent probably.
Yeah, I mean, or like...
This is like Freeman Dyson can tell you, nobody knows if these models even work, because he was there when the guy invented the weather models, and we don't know if it will happen, how fast, probably will, but it's impossible to really predict. So yeah, maybe if people start moving out now, maybe it's not even necessary if this will be prevented. Maybe it will be prevented, so it's a hard problem.
So, and this reminds me of a discussion I had with a friend a while ago. He was basically speaking about this radical thing that we would tokenize natural assets like air, water, forests, etc. And if we would combine it with something like TCR or just bonded curves, it would basically mean, like the more the country is polluted, the more the prices of water, air, and other resources go up. And basically whoever actually lives in that country, that it's a resident, so because that person is also breathing that air, they would get like those tokens allocated. And in this way, maybe this could somehow work, to incentivize the companies to be more ecological, because they would need to buy those tokens for their production. So the more polluted, the bigger the costs. I don't know. Next.
I mean, I don't know. I have a different perspective. Like, how about the education? For example, I come from development country. I come from Indonesia. So it's like a lot of people there. I mean, I've been living in Europe, and I saw like how the society work in here. Like, they do recycle and all that stuff. And then the plastic, they know how to throw it and how to recycle. And then in my country, we don't really like have this knowledge, like how to do recycle and how to do things to prevent the climate change. So I don't know. I was thinking like, how about all the foundations, like this kind of blockchain and stuff, not only just focus on the climate change, but the climate change is like about the people also. So the people, if they don't know what is exactly the climate change and what is the thing that affect of the climate change, I don't know, like maybe we could start from something simple, like with the people and the education. That's what my point of view. Indonesia.
I was just going to agree with you. Yeah, it comes back to just what the metric is and how we agree on what that metric is. Again, over and over. It's a problem, I think.
Well, so this was a nice round. There was another topic I don't know that we've got to. Did we talk about fair data yet? No? You want to go for it?
Okay, so I come from a project called Data Fund, and we've been working a lot and thinking a lot about how ethical data exchange should be, how a sustainable data economy of the future should look like. And it was always also very difficult to explain to the mainstream people what we are about. So in this sense, we kind of came up with the concept of fair data, which is in a sense in a very loose sense, the digital equivalent of fair trade. So, and if I tell you that Facebook is not fair data, it immediately clicks. And it goes even further. The thing is, this is something also that we are now working on. It's trying to establish fair data principles that should be designed from the community by the people. So here come also TCRs and curation markets into the game. But also the reason why it's, in a sense, what we are not speaking today a lot about is that, for example, me and my phone, when I use my phone, from the cognitive science perspective, we form one cognitive system. My phone is my extended mind. And it's a little bit an abstract notion, but still, if my phone is part of me, it's my extended mind, then personal data is also, it's me. And here comes then the question, when there's a lot of talk, who should own personal data? I mean, we don't speak about who should own me or who should own you, So in this sense, it's like once we recognize that personal data is us, then actually the question of ownage is also becomes questionable in a sense that we are actually speaking about slavery, about a form of data slavery. So in this sense, why we find this then important, the Fair Data Society is the non-profit track of Data Fund, is that we are actually today standing on the crossroads. Do we go in the direction that's been charted now, where we are actually already in data slavery and it's getting worse? Or should we either go in the direction where we are in control of ourselves, of our personal data, we have the rights, we are also fairly compensated when it comes down to this, and this is what we call Fair Data Society. So that's kind of the idea in a nutshell.
But it's a really complicated problem, because there's my data and our data. And so if we do some sort of thing together, some sort of sporting activity or whatever, whose data is that? Right. So and maybe I'm okay with someone taking my data, and maybe you're not. And so these are actually quite difficult. It isn't a simple problem. It's actually quite a complex problem.
It's a different paradigm. So we're talking about data from an ACL paradigm in that respect. If we think about it in capabilities, you get to grant connectivity in the ways that you please to whoever you want. So it's the fact that we've built everything backwards that has caused this. So I think we're probably in the turnaround now with DID being a pairwise connection. You both share your data when you have a conversation. Who owns that? Well, neither of you own it, but you share it together. And if you give the capability to somebody else to join that conversation, well, it's the three of your data. But it's the paradigm of the bouncer at the door rather than the bearer token. That's just my opinion again. No, but
I don't know the answer to this question I'm going to ask, but is it a losing battle? Is it analogous to, for example, carbon dioxide that I'm breathing out? We're all breathing out carbon dioxide now, and that belongs to the world. And that enters the atmosphere, and everyone can use that. But at the same time, I'm also breathing out a lot of clues about myself: health issues, what I ate, what my mood is, maybe how I had sex, things like that. And is it a losing battle? Because one day that carbon dioxide that I breathe out has DNA markers that identify me, and I simply have no control over that. I cannot exert control over the air that I'm breathing here, and when I go home, the air that I'm breathing out there. So is it possibly a losing battle? And therefore, should we just focus on all data should be open source, all data should be allowed to be used, and it's actually the standards that are the issue? No.
So. In my opinion, it's like why we are making also this, in a way, really kind of meta-physical view. It's not a losing battle. It would be like if we, like the slaves in the 18th century, when they were wondering about slavery, how to get rid of, they probably also, some of them at least, didn't ask themselves if it's a losing battle. So it's a lot of these changes are actually that need to happen, are going to happen on the sociological level. First, we need to recognize the situation we're in. So, slavery today in the most of parts of the world is unacceptable. So also, at least most people avoid it. Slavery is still present. So, and in this sense also, I think if we just recognize how we are being treated now in the digital domain, and this becomes unacceptable, a lot of things will already change. But it's not going to be like, it's not 0 or 1, it's somewhere in between. So it's these questions. Then when you mentioned like our data, it's excellent point. And we've been thinking about this. So with some data that can be labeled as my data, it's quite easy. It gets complicated, like we make a photo now and it's all of us on the photo. Whose data is it,
It was like the comment earlier, put an orange sticker on your name tag if you don't want a picture taken of you. Okay, how does that work? Right? So one of us has an orange sticker and someone takes, he's got a camera over there that's videotaping this session. So is someone going afterwards and fuzzing out that face with the orange sticker?
Yeah, but it's like, okay, this is pure speculation, but I think if we would somehow start acting to behave in the digital world and apply same logic as we do in the physical, a lot of things would already change in a natural way. So it's, when we speak technically, we speak about ZK snarks. I think ZK snarks enable a lot of new interactions regarding the data, where it's more like they can create a dialogue like we're speaking now, where it's for me physically impossible to share everything that's going on in my brain, But in the digital, we actually do that. We just share like our whole hard drives, We are not providing the answer. So it's recognizing these things. And then also, yes, when we speak about our data, then we can speak about how does our data work for the common good, And we can speak about co-ops and maybe structures upon the structures of my data going towards our data and so forth, So I think first we just need to recognize that the way how internet is built now is wrong. Yeah.
So I think if we think about like the prioritization of fair data, maybe in like a peer-to-peer interaction, it's not as important. Maybe you just set up standards of like agreeing to capture that data, and if you do capture it, like agreeing upon ways how to use it. I think a more important relationship between data is like business and consumer, because we're seeing a lot of businesses like getting hacked, like Facebook. A lot of businesses like emails getting read. I heard on like Gmail, and so if you can figure out a way to kind of flip the script on that business to consumer relationship, because businesses, they have a vast amount of data which they have to then store and then use appropriately and then keep up to date. But if you instead figure out a way to have the user retain ownership of their personally identifiable data, and be able to give permission to businesses to be able to communicate with them via those avenues, let's say mailing address, email, phone number, but then allow the business, who's also creating data based off of that consumer's use, be able to figure out how to measure and analyze the data, but anonymized to that person. So it's like they know that, consumer XYZ bought this, purchased this, viewed the website here, but it can never be tied back to that person. But they can still facilitate personalized ads or messages to that person, because they have permission to email that person. So if you could use blockchain to facilitate that anonymization. So if you start there with the business to consumer, because businesses are going to have the most amount of data, and then shift into figuring out how, person to person, like if you give me your phone number to call you, or if we can, figure out a way to facilitate a phone call without me needing to get your data. Because once I have it, then I kind of, you're just trusting me not to abuse it. Like even just like going to an email newsletter, I could put anyone's email address. There's no verification method that I own that data.
So, one really interesting thing when I was looking more into slavery, the thing is, why did slavery arise? Because at that point it presented the most efficient business model, So it was all about efficiency in business. And also, why did slavery get abolished? Was because with employment we actually have more efficient systems. And I see that they is not completely disagreeing with me, and I'm just passing the stick because I want to hear the other side.
Okay, slavery, first of all, has been around as long as man has existed. Right, and it's still around today. Slavery from the 19th century in the context of the North American dimension is absolutely that. Slavery was used throughout time, whether it was even going back as the 15 or 1600s here, most of the Ottoman Empire. Anybody who used galleys as ships, they used slaves to power those ships. Slavery goes back to the Roman Empire. You had generally an option of you were either killed or you became a slave. It was literally that a defeated army would become or a defeated region. Those were the options: death or slavery. So we have a particular context. I'm not defending slavery, first off, okay, but we have a particular context of slavery in the context of the 17th, 18th, or 18th, 19th century. It has a long history, and it has a very different dimension, but it isn't only the economic of more of a history point.
Yeah, very true. When I was referring to it, I meant chattel slavery in the 19th century. But yeah, it was like back in Egyptian times. So there were like different nuances and actually also different rules. So yeah, very true. Thank you for pointing that out.
However, I think your point is still valid regardless of the frame you're looking at it through. It was the economical incentive. It was a better business model than employing people before there was an economy to employ people through. So your point still stands.
Kind of derailing back to the topic of conversation. If that applies to human capital, right? If employment employment through an economy is more efficient than slavery.
But yeah, it was back in the Roman, in Egyptian times. So
is there an analog in the data world where if we treat data ethically, we'll be more productive rather than less productive? Is there something?
However, I think your point is still valid.
Is that something that's?
Yeah, this was actually what I wanted to say, but then got a little bit mind wandered. In my opinion, I don't have any proofs right now, but we are also working on this, trying to figure out. It's basically a fair data economy is more effective for everybody. So even the companies that will recognize that by giving back the data to individuals, enabling them to have control, supporting free flow of data, data portability, and so forth, will actually have more viable business models than companies that don't do this.
This reminds me of something from Jordan Greenhalgh's, I think it's his name, about complex systems and step functions. So at the moment it's better if everybody who doesn't share the data has benefits, but only if everybody all at once would flip, then it will be better. But it's impossible to achieve this in stages because nobody will go first. So maybe we need some D-Day, 1st of August 2030, everybody flips.
Will actually have more viable.
What was it? Open, like open sharing of data or portable data. That's what you said. That is a tangible benefit. Like if a user has control of their data and they can use it in all their services, that's like a UX benefit for everybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the point why we are also working with protocols in blockchain. It's like for me to use your dApp, I don't need to ask you permission. The user needs to come to my dApp and basically that's it. And I mean, here I guess we all understand the benefits of it, but the world outside doesn't yet.
I think that's the problem, like it's just like small amount of people know about this blockchain and all the private data. It's important, because like
the user has control of their data.
like out there, like a lot of people doesn't know about this. What they think about Bitcoin, Ethereum, it's just about money, like make money faster in 3 times in 2 minutes. This is what people think about this world. I mean, honestly, I came here as a commoner. I'm not really in the blockchain business, So what I'm thinking, like out there is thousands of people doesn't really care about information, data, private. I mean, for them, because they really enjoy all the services like Facebook and all that stuff, So I think the difficult part is how to communicate this important matter. That's what I think. And I think it's one of the duty of blockchain. What they think about Bitcoin.
So yeah, this is also something that we discovered. One of the things that we work on. We're going to have a demo one day before DEF CON at Swan Mini Summit. Is a relatively simple DApp. It's the beginning. It's just decentralized file transfer. So like WeTransfer.com, but sending files over Swarm and in an encrypted way. And that's a good question. The working name is Fairdrop, but somebody snitched the ENS domain, so we are now kind of frantically looking for a different name. But like you said, it's I don't believe, with our DApp, that unless a lot of effort we put in and are still putting into the UX. Because it's like, I don't believe that just the specs that you can send it over Swarm and that nobody sees and that it's privacy and encrypted, that it's going to matter for the average user. So the experience of your DApp needs to be on par with the centralized solutions, and then on top of that, you add extra benefits like privacy, decentralization, and for that we are still quite far away, because blockchain itself does give some constraints. At the same time, I think it's like you said, I don't see that the change is going to happen like from 0 to 1 in a sense for Facebook. I see Facebook as the new smoking. And it's like sooner or later everybody will know that it's bad for your mental health, but some will still ignore the warnings like this can make you really depressed or something, And the other thing, that inspiration that I kind of see is actually where I draw some parallels is veganism. So it's in a way, what I mean with here is, and I'm not a vegan, I'm not, so I'm kind of vegetarian. I'm vegetarian, I guess. But it's like how we see how the ideas evolve. Veganism today is one of the most growing ideas. So in a sense, privacy, control over your data and things like that, I think this is also going to be a similar process where more and more people take control of their digital life and hopefully also inspire others.
Here, taking control of your files and data, I can explain my approach in 1 minute, because I think this is the only way, at least for me. It's like gold. You don't really have it if it's not in your house, like in the mathematical sense. So data, if it's not on your server, maybe in your house, and it doesn't live there, out of there, then it's out there. You cannot expect not to be used. You cannot mathematically. But if you take care of your own data under your control, then you get a set of problems which you don't have if you let somebody else take care of this. For example, backups, availability, and stuff. But I'm solving and successfully iterating for my own use. But I'm aware that it's not for like non-programmers or taxi drivers. They won't do this. But I still wonder if there is some way for them also to, because, for example, Raspberry Pis, cheap computers, everybody with good user interface, maybe everybody can buy one, at least have some of their basic stuff. But sooner or later you run into problems. For example, your photo library, it's a big problem. I won't save it to Google or anywhere, and I don't have it solved for our family purposes yet, but I will solve it. But
have you heard of DApp node? Yeah, so I think that's the personal server option with the nice UX, and you can have one person in the family that shares it with everybody else. So then you know who has your server, and it may be not you. You know, your grandma is not going to have her own server, right? But maybe you're kind of a tech savvy guy. You can have a server for all of your friends and family. So I want to move to the last topic, just so there's time. But yeah, okay. And also introduce investment versus charity.
So you were just 1 second too fast for me, because I wanted to say DApp node, and the other thing, which is and big kudos to give it for this. And the other thing that I wanted to say is a big important part is the ident tree. It's also released, because this is when I said also before that interaction becomes more human-like. So I have my data on the DApp node, and I just give need to know only answers through the ident tree, you know. So I wanted only to mention this one.
You can promote my projects all you want. It's totally cool. Okay, so the next one, though, the last topic is investment versus charity, and you brought up the topic, so maybe you can introduce it.
So I've noticed kind of at least in the way that Giveth is doing charity, quote unquote, it's in many ways it's very similar to, say, angel investing or just early investment rounds in general, where you are giving resources in exchange for the accomplishment of goals, right? So where does the line between giving for good go to giving for yourself, and should you draw that line? Do we want to draw that line?
I think charity will always be investment, because if you're investing into something, you're investing into the good for your future, your children's future, etc. So I think that line will always get crossed with charities regardless, but whether it's the good or evil type of investment, I think is maybe the questions to go talk. No? Okay, well, I still think it can get crossed either way.
There's something else to be said about the intention on return. Like, you're investing in something, but the expected return, if it's somewhat, depending on how you answer that question, I feel like puts you in one camp over the other.
So there's this notion of impact investing, and you have impact funds that is probably somewhere in the middle, where investments are considered not just for the return they bring, but also for the impact they do. And maybe this goes a little bit along the lines.
I think there's also another interesting middle ground where it's like the Kickstarter model. So in the charity, there's no expectation of return. In an investment, you expect a return on your investment. But the Kickstarter model is that I just want to invest to a project and I'm going to get what I said that I'm going to get. So there's a few middle grounds, and I think that's where it becomes interesting.
And do you want to facilitate that with Giveth or other?
So, I mean, Giveth's just really a application for transparency. And if people wanted to create a token and say every time that money goes here, the token goes up in value or whatever, that can be built on top of it. But it's not like a core piece. Really, it's just like donations come in and they're tracked. And maybe there's someone gets a T-shirt every time that their money gets spent, to give us your address. You can do all of these lines, and it's very extensible as an application, but it's not necessarily telling people how to do it one way or another, And in the end, that's the experiment. How obviously the charity system is a little sketch right now, or it definitely has a low public opinion, and we have this opportunity in the blockchain space to build new systems, new incentive systems, and new ways for people to interact with each other, right? in a decentralized way. And so that's what Giveth is trying to enable, people to try the whole spectrum if they want, right? There's the TCR model where we're going to create a shitcoin, but it's doing good work, right? Or there's just like what we're doing now, which is donate money and you'll get nothing other than those happy feelings that you're supporting a project that you really want to support, and you see where the money goes, right? So, it's an open model, and there's a lot of experimentation to do.
I think it's useful to define those two words, investment versus charity. And I'm thinking that charity is investment in everything, in the greater community, up to planet Earth, or maybe beyond, with the idea that there's been some injustices, some imbalances caused by either nation-state players, or also injustices or imbalances of nature. Where I was born, the country that I grew up in, maybe created an imbalance vis-a-vis someone else living in a different country. Therefore, it's my duty to correct that. It's my duty to be charitable so that imbalance is actually corrected. When I want to invest not the whole world that I'm thinking about, it's my stomach, myself, my family. Maybe that's where it extends to. Maybe a little bit my initial community. That's what multiplying leads to. So I think those two definitions are important to think about. And then I think what Giveth, the magnificent opportunity that Giveth offers is maybe we can mix those. As you're saying, maybe I can be a little bit 20% selfish and 80% charitable, and maybe I can have a high resolution dynamic resolution where I change that, or where we all change that.
Yeah, and I can just say there is that kind of experimentation going on. Like for DAppNode, DAppNode eventually will be a sustainable nonprofit organization. Hopefully, even get DAOified one day, right? And Jordy and I put in a bunch of seed funding, but we actually hope to get that Ether back eventually, right? And then but we used Giveth to do the accounting, and so we can see how much Ether we're owed back, and now we're starting to get some back, which is cool, right? But like Tenegraph, we fund Tenegraph without any expectations of a return or any deal like that, and yeah. So yeah, you can do whatever you want. The nice thing is you can plug and play because it's a blockchain.
I think another important thing to bring up is it about motivation, or is it about result, or is it a combination of both? And so like the CETA model is, yes, it's a charitable cause because you're giving to a nonprofit, but it's also somewhat of an investment because you have that chance to win. And so no matter what your motivation is, it's the same for everyone. But the result is either you win and you get 30%, or you just have that happy feeling of you've given to charity. But I do think like charity is an investment, but not all investments are charity.
And I also think it's really nice. Historically, we have this kind of binary version of looking at for-profit and non-profit. And I think the reason that is because we haven't had the ability to have the level of transparency necessary to blur the lines. Because if it's sort of one thing and sort of another thing, unless you trust that what is really happening is what they say is happening, then you have to kind of push yourself too far one way or too far the other way to make sure you're fitting in like the mold that was established for nonprofit or for profit.
I like the example where you had the expectation that you're going to get the money that you invested return, and the expectation where, I'm just giving this charity. What about like the middle ground where you've done a project and it actually can only return half of it or 50% back? This kind of an interesting case. It doesn't really have to be this binary. Yeah, so sometimes a project will be able to do everything you can do with half the money. You can get half of it back, or I don't know. Just gonna what?
I mean, that's the nice thing. All these things are totally possible to be even just automated, right? If people want to do it. But also, I don't think that there's anything wrong with making money off of charity. I mean, I don't do it, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't. There's a lot of impact investment going on, and if unfortunately, we do live in this system of money where, that's what it's kind of like fish in water. We almost forget that it's around until you go to Burning Man where it's disappeared for a week. Then you realize that you're swimming in money, right? And if that's what gets people going, if that's what the incentive model of the day is, I don't think that it should be wrong that we get people involved in finding a way to make the water cleaner, and the people that do it and invest in it actually make some money. I don't think that's dirty. It feels tainted because money is evil and it sucks and we need to fix it. That's a different topic, but it should be okay.
I was just going to say it's almost a double whammy. Like, it's extra because you're getting people motivated by what they want, which is the money, to do good things, even better.
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing. It's more like sustainable charity, right? If you can make incentives on the side of the charity as well as incentives on the side of the charitor, then it can be more sustainable in both ways.
I mean, depending on the charity you're talking about, most of them don't make money, right? Almost all, the nonprofits are not for nonprofit versus not for profit. Whether you're a small medical group that's helping children with, very serious diseases, or responding into some sort of a SARS or an Ebola outbreak, there's not really a money-making motive. So I think your comment earlier about people not understanding about the whole blockchain and people generally being afraid of blockchain, you have a good opportunity. This is a great opportunity. The people who don't understand it tend to have a lot of the money right now because they tend to be free income tends to come with age, usually. But you're a unique opportunity here to create a system of really opening up this whole space, which otherwise isn't there. But I think maybe you said about the UX or the user experience is really the key. Right now, it's terrible. There is nobody else other than the community that's here that's going to actually probably be giving on the Giveth platform, because no one else will know how the hell to do it, right?
Yeah, and we won't expect it to be. It's an experimentation, and it's a 10-year plan at least, And I think that there's a lot of movement over here in the UX side of things, that we're building meta transactions and other cool techniques that will make things easy. And we just got to forget that it's blockchain, and just no, it's not. It's whatever the application is doing.
Blockchain is plumbing. How many people open their walls and look at the pipes in their house? How exciting are the pipes to look at your? It's plumbing. That's reality. It's all plumbing, right?
So I'm just here, kind of a little bit brainstorming. It's I'm personally not sure if we are capable at the moment of, let's say, true impact investing. Because when we look at the money from the investment perspective, or basically earning, it's I remember the first lesson I had at the economics college was the purpose of the company is to grow. So that was the first lesson. It kept being repeated throughout the years. So, and before I mentioned with Data Fund that we have the non-profit Fair Data Society track and the for-profit one. And in a sense, when I work on Fair Data Society, it's yes, I don't need to think about the bottom line. I'm just here to think about how we can make things better. And this is what I also love with Giveth. I think Giveth is actually, in a way, giving the possibilities that people can create and express themselves without thinking about the existential things, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to, buy some food? I'm just here to do it, So until I think we will be able to speak for impact investing in a more pure sense once there's no existential need for the people. Because it's easy to just give money around if you have millions, But the guy in Africa who doesn't know how to buy food for his kids for tomorrow has totally different perception of money,
But I mean, if we're talking blockchain for good, we got to really look at it. One of the major use cases of blockchain is creating money. And if you look at the banks, right, and the fiat system and how that money is created, it's actually incentivizing by default banks to loan money. And that's like a charitable act almost, right? And that money is created out of nothing to inspire banks to support the economy and support small businesses to get loans, right? Well, with this technology, we can create money that supports and incentivizes something else, right? In Bitcoin, it's supporting the Bitcoin network and guessing a random number. Now, unfortunately, 99.999% of the effort is guessing a random number at this point, and a little bit of supporting the network. But there are other cool blockchains that are doing other things, like Folding Coin, right? Like Cure Coin. They actually do proof of folding proteins. So there's some guys in Stanford that are using this distributed network of computers that are mining a coin, and they get this coin when they work on folding proteins for their research, right? And if we can do something like that for cleaning, I mean, it's very difficult. It's a lot easier to stay in the digital realm, right? But eventually we can get to a space where maybe if you clean up these beaches, you will get these tokens, and then the currency itself actually incentivizes people to clean beaches, right? Or to build orphanages, right? Yeah, grow forests, protect trees. And if we can start creating systems like that, then you won't have to think, where am I going to get the money to plant trees? Because there is a system in place where money is created for planting trees. And that's the direction I want to see Blockchain for Good go. We'll see if we can get there, because it's a huge leap. But that's why I'm really excited about this curation market model, where we create some Ponzi scheme shitcoin, but it creates an incentive for people to start contributing value to a decentralized community focused on a goal.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe and give us a rating or comment if you enjoyed this content. This episode was brought to you by Santa and the unicorns at giveth.io. Remember, this podcast is made possible by the donations we receive from listeners like you. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so by donating Ether at dattpodcast.com. That's DATT podcast.com. Please check the show notes for more information. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep decentralizing all the things.
Decentralize.